punishing ourselves. Let's examine our theology just a little bit further. Let's imagine God as a verb, that something bigger than us that changes throughout time and space, something that we change and that changes us, something a part of the web of life as it always has been and always will be. This process, relational theology tells us that everything we do has consequences beyond what we can possibly ever know. It gives meaning to all that we do, drawing us into the mystery of the universe and affirming that we are in it, and it, the universe, is in us. It matters what we do, and as such, we should be conscientious, value-centered, and deliberate in our actions. Well, knowing this may just make us more aware of our mistakes, feeling the excruciating pain of regrets, right? No, let's not fall into that trap. As humans, we are imperfect, but we do have the ability to learn. But we cannot learn unless we're imperfect and make mistakes and carry regrets. To not have regrets may mean delusion or lack of a conscience. And it may mean the continuation of a destructive path forward. So really, we cannot live without regrets. But what we must do is... But what about those mistakes, about choices we wish we had made in our life? You know, the choices that we could have made and that may have led to a better life. It's just not that simple. It's not that simple, is it? The grass really isn't greener on the other side or down the other path.
I mean, too far east.
The grass really is not greener. In process relational theology, because we don't know all the effects our choices make, we can't possibly know how things might have turned out had we made a different choice. Dr. and Buddhist Alex Lickerman puts it this way: you may pine for the life you think you've left unlived, but that life not only never existed, it almost certainly wouldn't have existed the way you imagine it. Think about your life today. Does it exist the way you once predicted it would? As I read on a meme that my sister posted the other day, the grass is not greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. Our actions matter, but it's impossible to be perfect. What is important is how we move on from there, tending to the fires of our own personal histories so that they do not die down or burn out of control. We can't live without regrets. They make up the story of our lives, who we've been and who we want to be. That is the hopeful message of this Unitarian Universal faith and its message of salvation. Hold history, but do not hold your regrets as suffering. Your life is worth a celebration. Today, Mark Gatzke, Robyn Douglas, Brandon Nuckols, and Ken Wechter will be sharing with us a regret from their past. More importantly, they will expound on how they were able to process these and free themselves from the sadness, repentance, or disappointment. would you lead off for us, please?
Good morning.
Morning.
I think some of my thunder may have been stolen up to this point. I wasn't sure if I was on track, but anyway, let me begin by asking, are there any Frank Sinatra fans out here? Is there one song in particular that comes to mind when you think of Frank? Call it out.
You made it my way.
I'm sorry?
You did it my way. I did it my way.
My way. Thank you very much. When I started thinking about regrets, that was the song that came to mind, and I hear Frank in my head. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. After all, he did it my way. And at first blush, it sounds bold and admirable, beating the odds to finish life as a job well done, and on his own terms. And he sang it with such conviction. But in truth, there's a sharp contrast between the unattached bliss that goes with living in the insulated bubble of doing it my way, and the sincere reflection of heartfelt regret. I have to admit at this point that I spent a good part of my adult life in the my way camp, rationalizing my character flaws and my mistakes, and denying the pain they caused others. Virtually all of my regret falls into the realm of disregard for other people's feelings. For many years, genuine empathy simply wasn't part of my personal landscape. Over the years, it cost me friends and lent itself to the worst part of a failed marriage. And as any of them could tell you, it hurts worse when they know you don't care enough to actually hate them. And they also know that you can never truly love them. If I left a lasting impression, it was usually that of a cautionary tale. I even used to joke that I never had to run from my past because it was usually the first one out the door. My long overdue salvation was finally getting a big choking spoonful of my own crap from someone who was better at living my way than I was. And it hurt me in a way I didn't know I could be hurt. And it set me down hard, forcing me to confront everything I believed about myself, and to eventually see the kind of person I had been for so long. That journey began over 10 years ago, and it's only in the last few years that I have faced and dealt with what should have been huge regrets instead of the missed opportunities they were. But rather than letting the past swallow my future or define who I am now, I have let those regrets stare back at me while they and I continue to reconcile with each other in a way that has me standing here, right now, in a place I never thought I'd ever be, apologizing for the sin of indifference. This is a small step toward redemption for me, but also a message of hope for anyone who has lived with regrets as a burden. It can be worse. Not having any could be the huge blind spot it was for me. That said, if I'm still learning to deal with past regrets and understanding why I avoided them for so long, part of it is that I've seen what the worst haunting regrets can do to someone. It can be a heavy load, heavy enough to be crippling over time, sabotaging relationships, aspirations. Even worse, it can offer permanent residence in the all-consuming and just as imaginary world of if only. While real life moves along and the driver is asleep at the wheel. As a friend of mine recently pointed out, though, it can be a light load, as well as a lamp to help us see the next mess before we run into it. It carries its own weight and walks alongside us as a guide for the present and the future. And while some regrets can still make us mentally wince now and then, they are clearly the language of conscience. Lessons to be reviewed, relearned if necessary, but with the conscious and conscientious goal of improving ourselves to better navigate the rest of the journey. So yes, they can surely weigh us down at times, but my experience has shown me that having no regrets made me a poster child for the unexamined life. Perhaps not quite what Socrates suggested, but nonetheless building a careless, hollow legacy that might matter only to the few who are like-minded, or even just to myself. In retrospect, it was a very lonely life. More importantly, this revelation has taught me that regrets are an integral part of the tapestry of an honestly examined life. They can be painful, but they are necessarily imperfect and often messy threads that make our woven self-portrait forthright and complete. If we can treat our regrets with the care and understanding they need, the ones that haunt us can and will make peace. And it will add to the genuine character of our lives, which would certainly be something less without them. Getting back to Frank's iconic anthem, My Way, I leave you with an interesting factoid. Despite his convincing performance, he actually hated the song. In 2000, his daughter Tina revealed that he actually despised the song for two reasons. One is that being his signature tune, he couldn't shake free of it. And secondly, he perceived it as being self-serving and self-indulgent. In fact, Mr. Sinatra, in his own words, was upset that such a song became a kind of national anthem. Even now, its message resonates in the terrible actions of those who choose to explore the limits of freedom without conscience. Seeing the damage caused by my own version of it, I'll gladly take regrets. And my way will never sound the same. Thank you.
Robyn. Okay. Winston Churchill so eloquently said, if you're going through hell, keep going. My hell story, I was working at United Space Alliance, which was NASA's primary contractor. It was my dream job. I've wanted it since I was in high school. I was working off the base, off of Kennedy Space Center, at an AutoCAD position. I found out about a position on base in a 3D CAD program called Pro-E. I jumped at the chance. The training, and to be on Cape Canaveral and drive past the vehicle assembly building every day. The manager was a nightmare. After the training, I applied for all the other jobs I could find that were on base. 39 total. I had a folder that thick. No callbacks. I found out later through a friend's husband that that boss was telling every interviewer that I was so horrible. If I were so horrible, why didn't he let me go? Found out later, he wanted to fire me himself. The conclusion of that story is he did. He fired me. And at the end of that, I contemplated. 2 days later, cops walked up to my door, guns drawn. I said, "Oh, that's funny," as I laughed. They didn't. They said someone at my work called them and told them I was a a danger to myself and others. After that, I cried and cried and cried. Then I picked myself up, dusted myself off, and applied for all the jobs I could in the area. I didn't get unemployment. Well, I worked in Cocoa, Melbourne, Orlando, until all the jobs were exhausted in the area because of the shutdown at Kennedy Space Center. Then I put my resume online for all of the United States. I got job calls from Igloo in Katy, Texas, Harris Corporation in Tucson, Arizona, and Automotive Robotics in Peoria, Illinois. Katy, Texas was Igloo, and they flew me out for an interview. I never heard back from them. Harris Corporation did a call online interview. They called me back and said the position was filled with someone else. Automotive Robotics was Caterpillar, where they were going to put me to work. The manager called me from Lafayette, Indiana, for a phone interview. They hired me on the spot for a 6-month position. I stayed for 4 years. The conclusion is, if you fall off your horse, job, bike, skateboard, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get back on. The closure, after all the tears that I spent, I did pick myself up. In all the different places I worked, I met people, did things. I learned a lot. The moral of the story, finish your regrets. Take a chance. Remember, if you're going through hell, keep going.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Brandon Nuckols. I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lakeland. Forgive me if I'm a little scattered this morning. I'm doing both tech and lots of stuff, so I've been juggling a few things. We've had some hiccups as well this morning. Regrets. So, when I think about regrets, I think about it's really about my behavior and actions, how those have impacted people over the years. You might even say I've lived a life to where I've adapted, to where I can deal with the things that society and my family has not been able to help me kind of process. When we talk about regrets, I work in mental health. We're talking about things that often include the word shame. Southern culture does not talk about how to deal with shame. Culture in general does not talk about how to deal with shame, not in American culture. So that's really, for me, what we're talking about and what I connect with on this. And when I look back, there is several incidents and episodes, some over the last couple of years, but there is certainly one that stands out from 20 years ago that I have still not addressed. And it was a minor situation. And I am now friends with Facebook with this person, but I'll tell you a little bit about this story. And I'll try not to go into too much detail. But I was working at this outdoor therapeutic school, New Dominion, and everyone, including the kids, it was a place for kids and teens that we were helping, and lots of young adults. I was in my 20s, 30s working there. And the staff and the kids followed the same standards. We dressed similarly. We had a dress code. We had hair codes, earrings. In fact, before I went to college, before I started this job, and as I was getting out of college, and this is relevant, I had to cut my hair. I have long hair now. This is the first time I've had long hair in 25 years or so. So I had to cut my hair, had to take out my earrings, and I hadn't had them. I've actually redone these. But how this is relevant is one of the people that I worked with was a Sikh. Anybody know what a Sikh is? Okay. Sikhs, by tradition, one of the things I learned at the time, I was not familiar with Sikh, with practices of Sikhism at the time. And this individual, Sikhs do not cut their hair. They do not cut their hair. In fact, it's a very big deal. They do not cut their hair. You'll see like head wraps, and their hairs are often head wrapped, and if they take their hair down ever, it is super long. Well, 20-something-year-old me thought this was not very fair. Because what I knew about this individual is they didn't follow the other things about their religion and their spirituality. So I questioned, why do they get to pick this one and not pick that one? Or that was my brain justifying it at the time. But I look back now, and I certainly think, why did I make such a big deal about that? It was more about me and my own hair and my own earrings than it was to do with that individual. Have I made amends for this? No. I will confess to you that I have not. I am friends with this person on Facebook. We have chatted since then. We've not talked about this incident. In fact, I'm fairly sure they probably let it go. They may not even remember it. But I do. Because it is an incident 20 years ago where I'm ashamed of my behavior and how I handled that situation. Also relevant in the last couple of years, especially even during COVID. There are a couple of situations, one even here at the church, where my behavior is not what it should have been. I'm not going to blame my behavior on the other person, but I will say in this particular circumstance, I had a conflict with someone here at the church. We had a conflict with each other. And through our Right Relations team here at the church, we were able to make amends and to figure out and come back into being in relationship with one another. And I have since learned over the last 20, 30 years that is much more the approach I want to take. No matter how justified I might feel like in my own behavior, because I think we all, certainly starting with myself, can get a little self-righteous. Our pride and our egos can get quite often in the way. I start with myself on those. My pride and ego are often wounded. But afterwards, I often find that I am ashamed of my behavior. And that no matter what the other person did or the other people did, I have to be accountable. Because that is not who I want to be. I want to be a better person. I want to be accountable for my behavior, regardless of whether that other person is able to do so. This has also come up recently in my relationship with my parents. Had a lot of conflict with them over the last year and a half. We are also making amends. So what I think more about these days is be accountable where I can, but I'm much more focused on doing my best to prevent those regrets, if at all possible. Meaning I try to live a daily life to where I'm much more mindful of my behavior and how I affect people than I used to be. Although I'm tempted to reach out to this individual over Facebook that I'd mentioned before from 20-some years ago, I think maybe I'm finally ready to reach out to them and to address that situation. Because what I need is forgiveness. Because the fact that I have not forgotten about that particular incident is really sticking with me is probably something I need to let go of and get some peace around, because I do not currently have that. I don't have a whole lot of other regrets, because generally I do try to make amends for those, but that's one that stands out that I have not. But if anyone is, also I work in mental health, so in substance abuse treatment, we also talk about making amends as well. And that's a big part of 12 steps or any recovery. It's about being able to move forward in your life. And when you're able to do that, you're able to live the life that you really want to be living, or that's part of how you do that. Thank you.
Ken will be joining us on Zoom, so he will be
up there in just a moment.
up there in just a moment.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I thought a little bit about this subject, trying very hard to think of a regret. And it was difficult because I try to live my life without regret. I thought about the aspect of making amends with people that you've hurt. And certainly there's been mistakes that I've made. But I come to realize the person that I've hurt the most throughout my life has been myself. Just by not being true to myself. I came out as a gay man late in life, and I spent my youth trying to deny who I was and how I felt, and to live up to expectations of other people. And so coming out was kind of a death of one life and the beginning of another. And I left some people in my wake that may have been hurt. But in the grand scheme of things, looking back, it was the best thing I ever did, was being true to myself. I've created a happier life for myself. Got a great husband who loves and supports me. Got a great community here who loves and supports me. The other thing that I think about when I think about regret is, again, has to do with my own self, is allowing fear to hold me back throughout many points in my life. You know, I'm naturally introverted, shy, have social anxiety. I don't make the connections with people that I need to make, and I don't, not good at maintaining connection with people. So whether it's my friends, my family, it's a struggle for me to keep in touch with people and keep people centered in my life. So it's something that I've struggled with and worked on my entire life. And a lot of that has held me back and kept me from making the connections I needed to make. But all in all, the older I get, the less I seem to care about what other people think, which is a blessing, actually. And I've learned to forgive myself, and I've learned to accept myself the way that I am, and realizing how important it is to learn to love and forgive yourself. So if there's one thing to take away from my perspective today, is learn to be your authentic self and learn to love and forgive yourself. Thank you.
As we ponder these things, let us take a moment also now to think about how we can share our abundance that we have. When we share with this congregation, we are able to continue the ways in which we learn together. When we learn, we know how to live into our values that light the healing and life-sustaining fires. Our ushers will now pass the plates as we receive the blessings of our choir and music director in this next hymn, Bring, O Pass, Your Honor.
50 cycle proud.
We are connected to the whole history of the universe, from its beginnings in the fires of the stars to the fires of our first human ancestors.
We tend the fires of our histories so that all may find peace.
We are contributing beings of one interconnected process.
We tend the fires of our histories so that all may find peace.
We each have a fire within us, lit by history, by our ancestors and the events of our lives.
We tend the fires of our histories so that all may find peace.
If we forget to hold history with an open heart, our fires might rage and harm others.
We tend the fires of our histories so that all may find peace.
If we tend our fires by loving and knowing ourselves, we can keep our passion for love and justice alive in the world.
We tend the fires of our histories so that all may find peace.
Let us create novelty in the universe, in the universal story that draws upon our deepest values and helps to keep the fires burning in all for peace, equality, justice, and spiritual wholeness.
We tend the fires of our histories so that all may find peace.
By our covenants with one another, may it be so.
Our closing words are from Ralph Waldo Emerson from his collected poems and translations. Write it on your heart that every day is the best day of the year. He is rich who owns the day, and no one owns the day who allows it to be invaded with fret and anxiety. Finish every day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities no doubt crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. Begin it well and serenely, with too high a spirit to be cumbered with your own